How do you become your best self if you, first of all, don't even know yourself? Today we want to go ahead and address the question, who are you? Now that's a very simple but complex and vitally important question. And like a Scottish author says, this is a question that's been waiting for you all your life. And so in our video today, we want to kind of gauge the importance of that question, how important it is. We want to explore at least one way of answering that question. I want to discuss the implication, the transformational implication of self-identity, of understanding who you are. So who are you? Who are you? How do you answer the question of who you are? No, I'm not saying what are you. The question of what are you is different from the question of who are you. I know what you are a human being, but the who are you question says, how are you as a human different from other humans? It focuses on going a little beyond your humanity to your individuality. What makes you different? You are like all other people, but you are unlike other people, and it is the way you are unlike other people that makes you who you are. So we're focusing here on finding out what your nuance of yourself, your commonality, your idiosyncrasies, that is what makes you you. Dig further into exploring the definition of who are you by also saying that who are you is a question that can be answered by summing up all the aspects of you, okay? Your physical aspect, your social aspect, your psychological dimension, and your historical aspect. When all of those aspects of you work together in such a way that it projects a unique, individualized aspect of you, it projects a unique individual in the world, that is you. So the part of the definition will require that you take all of these aspects into totality and see how when these aspects work together to project you as different from others while you are still similar to others. That is yourself. Yourself is a sum total of all your aspects working together to project you as an individual, to project you as someone unique and different. That is yourself. This way of defining who you are or defining yourself is important because it helps us to understand that one aspect of you does not define you necessarily, that you are not just your history, that you are not your bank account, that you are not your physical characteristic, you are not merely your social status, but that your social status work along with other aspects of you to come up with who you are. It is important that we understand that in order to define ourselves, we must take ourselves in the totality of who we are, not just a portion of who we are. I think it is Professor Little that says that the human personality, the human self is like a puzzle. You are not a piece of the puzzle. A piece of the puzzle is not the puzzle. A piece of the puzzle is a part of the puzzle. And so as you define yourself, as you define who you are, part of you does not define you. All the various parts of you come together to be able to define you and to define you in a way that makes you unique and different from everyone else. Now that we kind of have sort of a definition of what self-identity is, or a way of understanding the question of who are you, when we ask that question, we now understand what we mean when we ask that question. Let's go a little bit into why is it important? Why is it such an important question to answer. If you haven't answered it yet, then you're missing out on a lot. I'll tell you a couple of reasons why it's important to answer that question. There are at least about 3 reasons I can think about right off my head. One is that self-definition is so important for authentic living. You cannot be your true self if you don't know yourself. Okay? So it's important that you first know who you are. Otherwise, who is your true self? Otherwise, you become lost in popularity and conformity. You do not have, so to speak, a true north of a self. Okay? You do not know how to center yourself because you do not even know what yourself is. The second thing that defining yourself is important because self-definition is very critical to self-actualization. How do you become your best self if you, first of all, don't even know yourself? And these are people who will end up spending most of their life working so hard to be the next best someone else, the next best Michael Jordan, the next best Barack Obama, the next best Donald Trump, the next best Elon Musk, or whoever it is that your model is. You will spend the time in your life becoming the next best someone else because you have not taken time out to define yourself. Self-definition, understanding who you are, is so critical to self-actualization. So critical to self-actualization. So it's important that you take time off to define who you are. Thirdly, self-definition is also important to self-worth. The exercise that we'll go through here in just a little bit will help us to define ourselves. And by defining ourselves, you kind of understand what makes you who you are. And that kind of involves a process that helps you to begin to see, to look inside and really see the substance of what you are made of, to look at your life and see what it is that makes you who you are. And nobody leaves that kind of exercise looking down on themselves. People leave an exercise of self-reflection, of self-assessment, for self-definition, feeling a greater degree of self-worth because they leave from there knowing that, I may not be everything, but I am something. Okay? So self-definition is so critical for self-worth. I like, again, I think it is an Irish professor. I need to make sure I get these names right. But she said that when you stand up in the mirror and you look at yourself in the process of self-identification, you are looking not for confirmation, but for revelation. The self-definition process is a process of trying to look at yourself and find out what that looking is going to reveal to you about who you are. From this busy world of looking at other people and what other people are doing and what other people look like and who other people are, and taking that time to focus that mirror inside, to focus that lens inside and begin to look at yourself a little closer. Not to confirm that, yeah, I knew I was this, but to find revelation, to see what you will find out about yourself. And learn is a learning process, is an exploration process to find out yourself. Yeah, there may be some confirmations, but there also may be some crisis, and there might also be some revelation as well. But that, in the process of doing so, like I said, everybody who comes away from there knowing that, hey, I may not be everything, but I know I'm something, and that adds to an individual self-worth. You understand why it is important to answer the question, who am I? Let's now focus on how to answer that question, who are you? Okay, let's answer that question. Who are you? How do you answer the question of who are you? I like to use self-inventory. I think self-inventory is a really critical tool for defining yourself. Now, it's on the one hand is self-inventory, and you have to combine self-inventory with how that inventory, you have to now look at the inventory you come up with and ask yourself, in what way are these things, all of these things on this self-inventory list, in what way do they make me unique? Okay, it's important you answer that portion of the question. So it's kind of a two-part process. Define yourself. You define yourself by making a list, a self-inventory. You take that self-inventory and you look at it from an idiosyncratic eye. Like how does this, all of these make me different from other people? Doing those two things together help you to discover and find out who you are. So let's go into what a self-inventory will look like. And there are various forms of self-inventory. You can Google self-inventory. If you talk to a therapist, you can get a self-inventory for them. You could make categories, okay? Physical category, for physical characteristics, psychological characteristics, social characteristics, and historical characteristics. I like to also add idiosyncratic characteristics. Let me explain all of those things. Some of them are self-explanatory. Physical, you're listing down all your physical characteristics, the color, your eye, your hair, your skin, your height, size of your nose, things of that nature. You're listing all of those things down. And sometimes it's very good to be very detailed, as almost seems like a useless process, but it is almost a way of turning the mirror into you. You are kind of being introspective, and introspection has very, very high psychological value. Yeah, you know your nose is round, but yeah, write it down anyway, because every item you write down adds more and more to trimming the lenses of focus more and more on you, and it has a psychological impact and a psychological effect. Inventory is basically you taking stock of your various characteristics and aspects under several different categories, right? So there's a physical, and in the physical aspect, you really want to be looking at just your physical characteristics, the color of your eye, your size of your eye, size of your nose. Be as specific as possible. That really helps. I think there's a certain introspective value. It helps you to kind of take your attention from the world and to put the attention on yourself. It is actually indeed almost literally looking in the mirror, okay? As you do that, but write down as specific details as possible of yourself. Write that down. Then there is also the sociological aspect. Now, sociological aspect may be all kinds of various things, including the social roles you play. Are you a brother? Are you a sister? Are you a dad? It will refer to your professional roles as well too. What job do you have? What profession do you have? It can also refer to your hobbies, your affiliations, what groups are you affiliated with. All of those type of things are part of the social part of the inventory. Then you come to your psychological, right? What is your emotional characteristic? Your highs and your lows. Talk about that in your in-betweens. What emotional states and characteristics do you have as such? You want to talk about your dreams, your aspirations. You want to talk about your values and your beliefs. All of those will come under your psychological category. And then you want to talk about your historical, right? And sometimes too, for historical, I like to just take a whole weekend or a whole week and just kind of write an autobiography of my life as detailed as possible. It does not. You want to just kind of free write, break it down. Yeah, you want to break it down into infancy, childhood, adolescent, and just really write down all you can remember from these places, the various stories, various achievements, various experiences, various exposures. You want to write those things down and capture those things more or less as part of your chronicle, the chronicle of your life, because it helps you. When I did my own autobiography, so to speak, not published yet, but I just did it just in order to be able to understand myself a little more. And when I did that, it really was very, very revealing. It was very revealing. I had some high moments, I had some low moments, but it was just really, really revealing to me. And I feel like it will be therapeutic, but also a beautiful self-discovery process for anybody. Write down a full history. You want to write down anything, your nationality, your upbringing, things, your experiences and things like those in there, so that it captures your history. It captures also, it can capture you historically. Where were you when certain things happened, and how did it impact you and influence you? You want to talk about those type of things as well. And so when you take all of those categories together, here's another category that also very critical, very important, that you need to do an inventory under: your idiosyncratic category. What does that mean? Idiosyncratic simply means what's uniquely you, your quirks, things that makes you different from other people, things you do that most other people don't do, anything that makes you strange. Yeah, I know that ultimately with a number of people in the world, you're unique. Some aspects of your uniqueness is shared by other people. And we'll talk about that more when as we define the self. But it's important that things that are evidently, repeatedly recognized as causing you to stand out, whether good, bad, or ugly, right? Whatever that is, write it down. Write that down, because your idiosyncrasies are certain things that cause you to tilt more as an individual. So it's important that you write that down. But now that you've written all of those things down on the various categories, it's time to begin to look at all of them in the idiosyncratic light and ask yourself, how does these things work together to make me unique? Now, you may have people out there who share the same history with you. You got friends who you were born in the same neighborhood. You guys grew up together. You're still friends. You probably still live in the same neighborhood, but you're different from them. What makes you different from them? So you want to look at those type of things. You got friends who you are same height, weight on your basketball team, your same color, your skin, but you also can clearly notice that what makes you different from those guys is your upbringing, or maybe your aspiration and how you pursue your aspiration. So you need to begin to think in those kind of ways. What is it of all the things that I've listed that may cause me to be different from most people around me? My distinct aspects. And when you start to do that and start to interact with your inventory in such a way that you can draw out whatever it is that caused you to be individually you, then you are beginning to come out with the definition of who you are. The definition of who you are is not only the distinction, but the definition is all of your aspect, but all of your aspect working together to make you uniquely you. You understand how I'm coming up with that? Because I am, for example, personally, I'm a Liberian. I'm from Liberia, West Africa. I was born and raised there for the most part, but my adult enculturation for the last 20 years is American. So I've lived in New York, Kansas, and a few other parts of America that also had an impact on my enculturation. They enculturated me. That adds to who I am. But then that blends also. I may have friends who were born and raised in Liberia and had lived in America in different places, but the cities they live in affected and impact how they see the world, but also the exposure, things they were exposed to, the upbringing. And for me, I was exposed at a very early age to leadership development, and that exposure affected the trajectory of my life, the things that I became passionate about. And so while I may have friends who have come the same route as I may have geographically and as far as heritage and upbringing, that exposure definitely makes me different from them. It tilts me and it affects who I ultimately am. At this point, I'm that person with that history, but at the same time, I'm this person who has a certain aspiration. And my aspiration also adds a certain uniqueness and distinction to how I'm different from the people who are similar to me. So that there are things that I do that's unique and different from what all of my good friends who I grew up with will do. There are ways that I see things, there are ways that I do things, there are ways that I handle things, there are ways that I navigate life, the way that I'll make a living that is totally different from these people. The things that make me tick, the things that set me on fire is different from all of these other guys, because when you look at the social aspect, my historical aspect, my physical aspect, you look at all of these things taken together, there are ways in which it makes me uniquely me, different from all of my friends. Go through the inventory. You make the inventory, go back through the inventory and say, how does these things make me different from all of my friends, all of my associates? How do they make me different? And the way those things make you different defines who you are. It defines the individual, the unique individual that you show up here to be. Critical. Very, very important that you do that. Now, like I said, it's complex. So it's not like a simple answer that I can give you and say, this is who you are. No, because human beings, we are complex, okay? And understanding and answering that individual question is complex. But by the time you do this, you understand your highs, you understand your lows, you understand your skill set, you understand your area of skill deficiency, you understand what it is that make up who you are and how that makes you someone who can show up and make a unique contribution. Okay, you understand what you can do and what you cannot do. You understand who you can be or who you cannot be. It helps you to understand yourself more. Self-identification is more about helping to understand who you are than actually creating a definition of who you are. And it's critical we understand that portion of it. Now, that being said, now that we understand kind of the process of self-identification, let's talk a little bit about the implication of it. And one implication, multiple implications of understanding who you are. But there's one that is very important to me. The question of, can the self change or does the self remains the same all the time? That's a very, very important question, because I hear people from time to time say, oh, this is just me. You just got to accept me for who I am. This is just me. I'm not going to change. Is that true? Are you really not going to change? Are you not changeable? And so the answer to that too is another complex answer. It's a yes and no answer. Yes, it's part of that person will not change, but part of that person can change. The question is if they have to agree to know those parts and agree to work on changing those parts. Let's talk about the part thing. The part of you that will never change. There's certain parts that are very fixed. You can't change your nationality. You can become a new person where you were born. I mean, not say your nationality. You can change that through naturalization, but you can't change where you were born. You can't change your history. Your history remains the same. You can hide it. You can distort it or redact it. Whatever you do, your history remains the same. You also cannot change your DNA, right? You know, especially, for now, 25 years from now, it might be a different story with some of the emerging technology. But for now, we know you cannot change your DNA. So there are certain things about you that cannot change. And even the propensity, a lot of the propensity, the most dominant propensity that comes from your DNA are almost impossible to change. Now, we're right on the cusp of sciences that are helping us to be able to change some of those things. But up to now, you cannot change your DNA and most of the dominant propensity that it gives you. But everything else about you, so to speak, can change. Your knowledge base, your profession, your value, your belief, Your height will change. I mean, you don't even got to do anything about that. Your height will change. It's been changing since you were born. People can change the eye color. You can change the size of your nose. So you can change everything else about you. If you could not change those things about you, then there will be very little need to have transformative discussions with you. But because everything else about you can change, it gives us hope for transformation. Change, the possibility of change is the basis for transformation. But the important thing anybody must do is to first of all decide what their best self look like. And once they decide what their best self look like, then they must determine what is it about me that I need to change to be my best self. The aspect of yourself that never changes, you still have power in those areas. You do not lose complete control because you can't change those areas, but you do have your control, and your power comes where you are able to change your relationship to those things in you that cannot change. Where you were born, your upbringing, your history, what happened to you when you were growing up, the exposures you were forced into, your the parts of you, those parts of you, your DNA, those parts of you that cannot change. What you can do is you can change your relationship with it, and how you interact with it, and how you utilize those particular aspects so that it benefits you, so that it adds more value to your life rather than take away value from your life. So I need you to understand, yes, some parts of you cannot change, but the question is, how can you understand it better? How can you relate and navigate around it or with it in a way that really adds value to who you are and what you have to bring into the world? So that point needs to be made as far as the changeability, whether the self remains the same or the self never changes. As we said again, it's a yes and no question. There are parts of you that will never change, parts of you that change. Transformation requires you focus on the parts that can change, and even the parts that cannot change, transformation does require that you change your relationship to that part. Let's talk about relationship to parts of you that never change. Some people they're victim because of what happened to them. They live a victim mentality. But I also seen people who live a victor mentality, even though they went through some of the same things that happened to victims. Those people decided that they were overcomers and they were not victims, and they will live as overcomers, and they will go through life, taking the lessons that they use, overcoming those things and using it to help other people to overcome those things. Two people can go through the same thing, and one person can continue to live as a victim, and another person can live as a victor. You can't change what happened to you, but you can change your relationship to what happened to you. And that's where your power lies when you're dealing with an aspect of yourself that you cannot change. It's important that I mention that. Let's bring it all back together, all right? Who are you? Answering that critical question that you've been running away from all of your life. It's very, very important that you answer that question because it impacts you very critically. And to answer that question, you have to add up your totality, all of you in all your various aspects, and act and determine how all those things together make you uniquely individual, okay? Uniquely different from everybody else. When you do that, you've answered the question of who are you? It's important that you answer that question. If you fail to define yourself, other people will define you. Let's do it now.